Chapter 7. The morning after the gods' battle, Eiji woke with a headache already starting. Today was going to be strange, and there would be a lot of unpleasant feelings, and he felt it would be best if he simply accepted that now. He didn't feel ready to face Lord Felix yet, so he stayed in bed and worked on his list of facts about his master. He had added several traits over the last few days. From 9, Lord Felix rubbed the back of his neck when he was thinking, to 14, Lord Felix remembered everyone's name after only hearing it once, but rarely as many at once as he could after the events of the night before. 15, Lord Felix... Well, when it came down to it, what could he really say he had learned? He had learned how his master behaved when he was out of his mind with blood, but what did that really tell him? It almost deserved a subcategory, but he decided against going that far. He would just add qualifiers. 15. When he was blood mad, Lord Felix was loud. 16. When he was blood mad, Lord Felix was clumsy. 17. When he was blood mad, Lord Felix was extremely careful and wary of his strength. 18. When he was blood mad, Lord Felix was merciful. 19. When he was blood mad, Lord Felix wanted to kiss Eiji. 20. When Lord Felix was blood mad, Eiji was still safe. That last one hardly counted. It was more a fact about Eiji's situation than Lord Felix himself. But it was such a relief that Eiji couldn't bring himself to leave it off his list. He wondered what he should say first to Lord Felix when he got his courage up and managed to leave this room. Should he apologize for his disobedience, thank the god for sparing him, or request his punishment first? He knew he needed to do all three, but what if his master cut him off? Which was most important? Perhaps... He was surprised by the faint sound of the door closing. Was somebody here? He bolted out of his bed and peeked through the curtain, but no, the living room was empty. He saw a scrap of paper on the table. Paper was dear on the ship, so he couldn't help crossing the room to examine it and see what could have necessitated this small extravagance. Dear Eiji, it read in a small, neat hand. I was called away unexpectedly. I'm sorry I can't be here for that talk we promised to have, but I will see you when you get through with your own work. I understand that you didn't mean to disobey me last night. You were obviously half asleep, and coming to my washroom was an accident. As such, please don't worry yourself over much about it. I hope your day is pleasant, and I will see you tonight. Yours sincerely, Felix. Eiji read it over twice, then carried it back to his room and packed it carefully in his trunk. He'd never had a letter before. This letter had important information in it, namely that Lord Felix understood that he had not intended to be disobedient. That helped Eiji order his priorities. First, he would request his punishment to show that he understood that the god's generosity meant a reduced punishment, not a total lack of one. The other important thing the letter told him was that his master wished to speak with him tonight. But Eiji could hardly think of the important parts of the letter because his damn fool mind was stuck on the first two words. Dear Eiji. He was such an idiot. It was a polite way to begin a letter, even he knew that. But it reminded him of how Lord Felix had been last night, the way he had called him dear and sweet in such a gentle tone, almost... He shouldn't even let himself think that the god had sounded affectionate, but there it was. Affectionate. And Lord Felix had kissed him. If he had taken Eiji's offer of his mouth service as it had been intended, Eiji would have known it was just a desire for release, no different from scratching an itch, and that alone would have been more wonderful than he deserved, affection or no. But it had been a kiss, just a simple, chaste kiss, not at all sensual or titillating for the god. That had to mean some sort of affection, didn't it? One didn't kiss the furniture. He mustn't think like this. He mustn't get his hopes up. If he let himself think that Lord Felix felt anything for him, if he started hoping that he would be invited to the god's bed, if he allowed himself to hope for anything, even that his current treatment would continue, well, he would be breaking his own heart this time, and there would be no one else to blame. Dear Eiji, Edgy with the sweet, sweet kisses. May I touch you? The morning passed slowly, and he ended up reporting to the kitchens earlier than his scheduled arrival just to stop his mind from running wild. Edgy! Norio rushed over, eyes wide. Last night was awful! Lord Cloelia came, and she wasn't yelling or banging on the door like some, but she was trying and trying to convince Lord Theodora to let her in to drink from one of us, and she isn't usually like that at all. She always ruffles my hair and offers to give me any tattoo I want when she brings the catch, and Lord Theodora was so fearsome. I was almost more afraid of her, even though she was calm and she never raised her voice. There was just this look in her eyes. It was terrible. But finally, Lord Thaddeus and Lord Julia came and coaxed Lord Cloelia away, and then no one else bothered us again. That does sound terrifying, Edgy agreed. Lord Felix had been less intimidating than he'd expected, but he remembered how Lord Antony had been after battles, and some of the same elements had been there. The wild eyes, the predatory gaze, the overpowering smell of blood. He couldn't imagine a god coming at him in such a state and demanding to feed from him. I'm sure your night was fine, Norio said. Edgy was glad for all his practice at controlling his facial expressions. Yes, just fine. I know it gets to all of them, but I can't imagine that Lord Felix was very frightening. I suppose I just picture him, I don't know, drinking a cup of tea and tutting at himself for all the killing. They can't drink tea. I know. It's just a picture I get in my mind. What was it like, really? Edgy did not care to share the night's events with anyone, and he certainly didn't want to be disloyal and repeat anything that his master might not wish to have repeated. He cast about for a bone to throw his nosy cadre mate. He was loud, he said finally. I'd never guessed that his voice could be loud like that. Really? Sometimes I have to strain to even hear him. Norio's brow furrowed. Do you think he's doing it on purpose, then? Is his voice naturally louder? Edgy hadn't even thought of that. Now that he did, he had to wonder. Lord Antony's voice had never risen when he was addled with blood. If anything, it had been lower and rougher than usual. But then, Lord Antony had never been clumsy. Certainly he wouldn't have fallen on his face the way Lord Felix had done. How would Lord Antony have reacted if Edgy had disobeyed him? Edgy tried to picture Lord Antony furious with him, delivering wrath and punishments, and couldn't. He'd never incurred that kind of a reaction. His chest felt heavy as he imagined himself disobeying Lord Antony and pleading for mercy as he had done the night before, and his old master simply stepping over him, walking away, maybe heaving an irritated sigh if he was especially put out. Was that what had happened earlier? Would he never receive any discipline? Was he simply not important enough for a punishment to be worth Lord Felix's time? But then, Lord Antony would not have thought him important enough to waste his time reassuring him, or writing him a letter, or kissing him. Stop! Stop thinking about the kiss. That would make sense. Edgy was grateful to have his thoughts interrupted by Norio's musings. The smaller man's brow was furrowed in thought. If Lord Felix has a naturally loud voice, it probably is to scare people. Teaching himself to speak quietly seems like something he would do. Have you noticed the way he always stands up against the wall so he doesn't take up too much of the room? And he never stands too close to the door or gets between it and you. He pays a lot of attention to those sorts of things. Edgy hadn't noticed any of that. Damn, Norio's list was probably a lot longer than his, and Norio didn't even belong to Lord Felix. You're a lucky man. Not that you need me to tell you that, Norio said cheerfully. Now come on, Rokuro will have work for us. Rokuro did. The cook had arranged a day of lavish meals for the offerings, most likely because of the fright those in the barracks had endured in the night. As for those in personal service, they probably needed the extra energy even more. Edgy didn't like to think of Lord Marcus's new attendant. Poor bastard. Lord Antony would have somebody new as well. The thought stirred him in a sick, tight way he hadn't expected. He didn't like imagining the master he still thought of as his was some fresh, blooming boy who was likely doing everything better than he had managed. The new offering would be the first in his cadre, as Eiji had once been, graceful and well-trained and perfectly behaved. The only difference would be that he might have the observational skills that Eiji lacked, so that he would understand how to please Lord Antony and notice the way Lord Felix stood and not have to rely on ridiculous lists. Eiji worked through breakfast cleanup and lunch delivery. He had just replaced his cart when there was a loud clanging from the doorway. "Lord Cloelia," Zenji cried. "I wasn't expecting— You brought the catch yourself?" Zenji was standing in front of a tall, broad god who had elaborate tattoos sheathing dark arms and heavy dreadlocks tumbling down a powerful back. Lord Cloelia, apparently. No wonder everyone had been so frightened when she tried to get to them last night. She stood now with a massive barrel lifted easily on each shoulder. When Zenji made to bow, she set both barrels down with a resounding thud. "Don't bow! No one bow! Could I have everybody's attention?" she called, her booming voice carrying easily to all corners of the kitchen. Once every pair of eyes was fixed on her, she dropped her own gaze to her hands, which were working nervously at one another. What in the world did a god have to be nervous about? "I am so sorry for my behavior last night," Lord Cloelia said, her head down but her voice still raised so that everyone could hear. "It was unacceptable. I know I frightened you, and I'm ashamed. My lover should have kicked my ass instead of coaxing me away. If any of you would like them to rectify that mistake, just tell Julia. But in any case, I am so sorry for the fear I caused you. I promise that I will never, ever do it again." Then Eji's heart leapt into his throat as the god thudded heavily to her knees and made a quick, clumsy bow. Her forehead actually thumped audibly against the wood of the floor. Eiji wasn't alone in his shock. Norio gave a squeak from across the room, and even unflappable Zenji started chattering in obvious chagrin. My lord, please, there is no need. We do not need— please." Lord Cloelia was already on her feet again. "I hope you can all forgive me someday. Now, if you'll excuse me, I still need to apologize in the laundry in the barracks. Thank you for your time." When the door closed behind her, Eiji realized that his mouth was actually hanging open. He snapped it shut and shook his head a few times to clear it. He had thought he understood the gods and their ways. He saw now what foolish hubris that had been. After 6 years of only having the chance to observe Lord Antony and Lord Marcus with any regularity, the gods could be as surprising in their kindnesses as their cruelties, he supposed. Maybe it wasn't wrong to have a little hope. Maybe the kiss really did mean that Lord Felix saw something of interest in him. He would know tonight. When they talked, well, the only thing for it was to be as beautiful and alluring as possible, and maybe even keep hold of this slender thread of hope. If he could be appealing and pleasing, then maybe— "Eiji?" Zenji's voice was still high and rattled, but no less authoritative for that. "Norio, come over here as well. You need to teach the new boy how to gut fish."